Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the regular Committee of the Whole meeting for February the 11th. I'd first like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory, the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Goury. The question period sign-up sheet is on the desk by the computers, and if during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet, and at the start of question period I'll call upon those who've signed up to address council. I understand we have a late item to be added, Ms. Goury?
That's correct, Your Worship. There is one late delegation that will be item 7H, and it's a delegation from Heather and Edward Ambo regarding property safety costs.
Very good. Then a motion for approval of the agenda is amended.
So moved.
Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. Discussion. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. You've all had a chance to read the minutes of the meetings of January 28th at 12 and 4:30. Motion for adoption of the minutes. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. We don't have any formal presentations tonight, and so we can get on with delegations. I would remind delegations you have 5 minutes. At 4 minutes in, the light will come on indicating you have a minute left, and I will politely remind you of that, and we'll ask you to finish at 5 minutes on the nose, please. And the first is a delegation, John Dacombe, regarding parking. Mr. Dacombe.
Hi. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is John Dacombe, and I'm here today to talk to you about problems we currently have with parking and pedestrian and bicycle safety in some of Nanaimo's older neighborhoods, and how we can finally fix those long-standing problems with at low or no cost with a few simple changes to bylaws and bylaw enforcement. So what neighborhoods are we talking about? Most of the legacy mid-20th century suburbs were built when the car was king. This includes my street, Chestnut Street in Brecken Hill. So here's a slice of Chestnut Street. The city property is 39 feet wide, but the actual roadway is 27 feet wide. That's pretty narrow, but it's not the narrowest in Brecken Hill. We have 2 lanes of parked cars and 2 lanes of traffic, which is actually 32 feet wide. Even though vehicles can park on the verge a few feet, it still leaves nowhere for pedestrians or bicycles to walk except in traffic. As well, vehicles are allowed under current bylaws to block residence gates and pedestrian access points. So here's a typical day on Chestnut Street. You can see how vehicles can pull up on the verge, but there's still not enough room for 2 vehicles traveling at the same time, and nowhere for pedestrians or bicycles to go as soon as they leave their property, except in traffic traveling at 50 kilometers an hour. So existing bylaws allow residents to park on the street for 24 hours without moving their vehicle, and visitors for 2 or 4 hours. They protect driveways from being blocked by vehicles, but not gates or walkways, and they mandate a 50 kilometer an hour speed limit. So weak bylaws. So this is the address of a resident in her 80s who takes handy dart. As you can see here, this vehicle has the right to block her gate under current bylaws. The car actually has more rights than the resident who pays property taxes. Here's another example of a residential gate being blocked by a vehicle. And here's a wheelchair ramp partially blocked by a vehicle. So what's the current option for residents to protect the pedestrian access to their homes? It's to leave vehicles on the street in front of their homes so they can ensure access to their gates when they need them. The city's bylaws are actually incentivizing behaviors that make our streets even more dangerous. Problems with enforcement. So enforcement is largely complaint-based. So if no complaint is filed, a vehicle can remain on the street for weeks. Most bylaw officers have no ability to know who's a resident and who is a visitor, so all vehicles get 24 hours grace by default. Bylaw enforcement is largely only weekdays, days 8 to 4, so holidays, weekends, evenings. When parking problems are greatest, there's little to no enforcement. Rules without enforcement are pointless. So what are some solutions? So the relevant bylaw, Consolidated Bylaw 5000, needs to be updated. On streets without sidewalks, residents' pedestrian access points need to be protected just as driveways are now. We need to change the speed limit on residential streets from 50 to 30 because adults are 8 times less likely to die if struck at 30 than 50, kids even more so. And we need to stop allowing individuals to use city property as free storage for their vehicles. And we also need to start enforcing existing bylaws. So the language on the slide here is actually off the city website. It theoretically forces residents to get permits if they want to park on the street in neighborhoods like mine. I've yet to meet a resident who's ever done this, who knows about this. If this rule was actually enforced...
1 minute, Mr. Tacombe, please.
Yeah. Any vehicles without resident permits parked on street could be fined, easily fined after 2 to 4 hours. Why have a rule if it's never enforced? So we need to give bylaw officers the tools they need, well-crafted bylaws, the ability to determine which vehicles are in violation of bylaws, enough officers that can properly enforce those bylaws, and increase the hours of service, because most bylaw problems, not just parking ones, don't follow bankers' hours. They're during evenings and weekends. We need to make this revenue positive by starting to ticket those who most deserve it, which is violators, because this is the bottom line. You're not just missing out on safer streets, but on a massive source of revenue. Victoria got $16 million in parking revenue. The city of Nanaimo, with a similar population, 1/10 as much. Bylaws and enforcement of bylaws are actually incentivizing bad behavior and making the city lose out on a large potential revenue source from the very people who should be paying their fair share.
Bingo. Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Questions from any members of council? Hearing none, thank you very much. Oops, sorry.
Push my button.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship.
Let us down.
Through you to the delegation. Mr. Tacombe, do you have any ideas on what you would think would be an appropriate cost for permits?
For residential street permits?
Yeah.
Well, I used the example of Victoria in the previous slide. They don't actually charge for residential street permits, and they still got 1,000% more revenue from us. That's parking and fees. They also only charge $20 for tickets, and we charge $22.50, so they charge a very low rate, but they've managed to monetize things much better. So we don't necessarily have to charge for street parking. Personally, I think we should, because they're using a city asset for personal gain, people who park on the street. But you've got to have some sort of control over street parking. We could use the Vancouver example. It's $40 to $400 depending on the neighborhood. I was in Ottawa, it was $200. There's lots of examples. Obviously, it's going to have to be based on density and a whole bunch of other variables. But you don't even need to actually charge for the service to enforce some sort of control on street parking, which we don't have now.
One more, if I may. Thank you. In that particular slide where you showed the two cars parking on both sides and the cars in the middle of the road, even though if we went with residential permits, you would still have that problem. Do you have any ideas on that? Because, you know, I can see there's not a lot of room there for people to walk.
Well, that's the thing. A street like Chestnut, which is pretty narrow, there is literally -5 feet for vehicles, right? If you've got 2 cars moving and 2 cars parked, that's 32 feet, and it's only 27 feet of pavement. Maple, which is the next street over, is 19.5 feet, and it's the same thing. So you got a -13 feet of traffic, right? Streets like that, realistically, you should not have 2 lanes of parked cars and 2 lanes of traffic. There's lots of things you could do, and I know there's other people speaking tonight to that. But, you know, a lot of these legacy neighborhoods have really wide streets. They're massive. Like one street over on the other side is Drake. It's a massive street. Unfortunately, it's 100% cars because the city's never done anything to take some of that massive space and give it to anybody but cars. But you've got a huge amount of space that you could utilize. So it depends really on the street.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Wanda Thompson regarding safer streets. Good evening.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Wanda Thompson, and I'm a walker and a resident in Brecken Hill. Before I begin my presentation this evening, I'd like to thank Council for approving the position of an active transportation coordinator, and I'd like to thank City staff for making efforts to pursue the principles behind Nanaimo's transportation master plan to give us more complete streets. So if you turn to slide 2, what are we talking about? Complete streets are streets that are designed to be safe for everyone, for people who walk, bicycle, take transit, or drive, and people of all ages and abilities. As I go through the presentation this evening, I invite you to keep the following in mind. 1, complete streets are safer, contribute to better economic, environmental, and health outcomes, and are key to successful cities. 2, Nanaimo already has a plan that prioritizes walking and cycling. Where can we find opportunities to do better? 3, prioritizing complete streets requires a culture change, and that needs clear political leadership and direction. Turn to slide 3. We're all familiar with the long layout of our city and the many car-dependent neighborhoods that were built mid-last century. If you take a look at the, I'm not going to go through all of the things that makes hard to Nanaimo to navigate and why we use cars, but I'd like you to take a look at the 2016 census data, which shows that in Nanaimo, we're below the BC average for active transportation and well below Victoria. And even though Victoria is different than we are, still 32% of their citizens commute actively, where in Nanaimo it's less than 8%. Slide 4. So what this shows you is a little snapshot of 4 different neighborhoods that are named there, and you can see immediately how fragmented our sidewalk network is. And what this means is we don't have complete streets. And when we hear, I never see people walking, this gives you a clue why we never see people walking, because there aren't the sidewalks to do it safely. So these crash numbers are from ICBC, and they count cycling and pedestrian crashes over a 5-year period. That's almost 20 pedestrians and 28 cyclists a year that were hit. This doesn't include accidents in parking lots, and it doesn't include anything that wouldn't have been reported to ICBC. 1 accident is too many. Slide 6. Nanaimo's 2014 Transportation Master Plan provides the vision and the policy direction for more complete streets that prioritize active transportation, walking and cycling. While Nanaimo's newer developments include more complete streets with sidewalks and bike lanes, there have been few improvements in the older neighborhoods. Current research about urban planning shows that safety is not just about our behavior, it's also fundamentally about street design. Most streets are designed to maximize vehicle flow, not to keep people safe, and I think we see that here in Nanaimo in spades. Slide 7, what's the goal? Complete streets that better integrate active transportation contribute to successful cities in multiple ways: improve safety, better health outcomes, stronger community cohesion, increased economic activity, and reduced impacts on the environment. It's hard to argue against that. Slide 8. I took this picture when I was in Courtenay recently of their updated 5th Street, which leads to their main commercial street. This is a great example where they took
Ms. Thompson.
4 lanes of traffic and turned it into bike lanes, sidewalks, parking plantings, pullouts for buses, and it's well signed. Everyone's got their own space. Community benefits. I've gone through some of these, but active transportation helps to build stronger communities. It helps to reduce petty crime because it gets people out on the streets. We have an aging population, and getting out and walking as part of a daily routine is one of the easiest and cheapest ways to stay active. Finally, to quote Greta Thunberg, our house is on fire. We need to do everything we can right now to encourage people to get out of their cars and get walking or pedaling. Action on multiple levels. It's time. So many of you have spoken about safer streets and what we can do for everyone from 8 to 80. We have the visions, we have the plans. It's time to do more. Yes, it will cost money, and yes, it will require new priorities, but the only thing between us and safer streets is political will.
Thank you. And yes, your time is up to questions, please. Councillor Bonner.
You seem to have just come across to me. I appreciate that. My question, I guess, wasn't answered there regarding the streets where don't have enough room. They're not wide enough. Do you have any ideas on what we should be doing for that sort of thing?
In terms of options, what I'd like to do is to encourage council to look at different pilot projects, and the presenter that's following me will be giving you some ideas on different options that you can use to make streets safer in situations like my older neighborhood and many of the old legacy neighborhoods around the city, things that are low cost, incremental, and that we can do on a community basis.
Sorry, I didn't realize you guys were tag teaming, so yeah, go ahead.
Very good. Thank you very much. Our next is a delegation from Aaron Dixon regarding safe streets in Nanaimo. Mr. Dixon.
Thanks. Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time. My name is Aaron Dixon. I'm an urban planning student at VIU, and I've connected with the previous delegation to help with the topic of safe streets. So piggybacking on what Wanda said, I'm going to discuss, with alignment to the existing Brecken Hill neighborhood plan, some possibilities to make streets safe streets in the Brecken area, but also acknowledging that what we discuss for this area can be extrapolated to other areas of the city, because the issue of safe streets isn't endemic to the Brecken Hill area. We see here that the neighborhood plan has envisioned an extensive system of walkable, bikeable routes. There are provisions for continuous sidewalks and efforts being considered to mitigate automobile traffic and provide opportunities for traffic calming as well as efforts to alleviate traffic diversion onto local streets from Stewart Ave. So what we're here to discuss aligns well with what the plan has set out to do. This is good news. Again, from the neighborhood plan, the dotted lines shown here are the plan's recommendations for enhanced local streets. The key strategies identified here are to provide pedestrian crossings that are pleasant, convenient, and safe, while also providing sidewalks and street trees. By using the full right-of-way of Chestnut Street, shown here, we can depict complete street setup in the top two renderings. All modes are well balanced. In the middle cross section, we can still maintain the parking on either side of the street and add sidewalks. This setup, although possible, might not be probable given the cost to implement citywide. But what the cross section below depicts is a shared street situation, which is, as you might know, is currently the case for this street. Except that as per the purpose of this presentation, we can make this shared street setup safer for non-motorists by doing things like surface treatment, signage, and traffic calming to more effectively alert motorists that they are entering a pedestrian priority zone. Which brings me to this slide. These photos all show various ways that planners can implement safe streets. Streets that we all like to walk along, play along, live along, by doing things like surface treatments, chicanes, signage, and separation of modes. We've provided examples of traffic diverters from Vancouver in these photos because, to my knowledge, we haven't used these in the city. So I thought we could look at them as an effective way to manage motorist flow, reduce route running, and slow cars along local streets. All these examples are where they've taken underutilized roadways for cars and turned them into places for people. The benefit of traffic diverters is that instead of retrofitting the entire block, you redesign the intersection to those blocks to calm the street. It's a more cost-effective way to open the street to non-motorists while allowing access to motorists in a manner that controls their movements. And obviously, considerations for emergency service vehicles would be addressed before implementation of these features. Here's another rendering of what a traffic diverter would look like. This map of the Breckin Hill area shows possible traffic flow setup using traffic diverters. These arrows indicate only directions where motorists can go.
1 minute, Mr. Dixon.
While non-motorized modes can pass through each intersection free-flowing. Rather than seeing these suggestions we've outlined today as ways to close streets for cars, we should be viewing them as opportunities to open streets for people. Because we're all invested in road safety and convivial streets, no matter what kind of mode you may use. Once we harness that sentiment, we can truly create wonderful places. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Armstrong. Sorry, Councillor Turley's first, actually. Councillor Armstrong in a minute.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Dixon. On the slide where you showed the cross-section of Chestnut Street, on the third, the one at the bottom, is that depicting one-way traffic or parking in one lane of?
This is two-way traffic. It's simply a shared street where kind of anything goes. You can put anything there. But
if I could just ask, the two vehicles in the bottom there both have headlights coming this way.
oh yeah, that's just an error of my illustrator talents.
I thought I
Yeah.
was onto
No,
something
good,
there for a minute.
Good observation. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's yeah. It would be typical.
But it
two
could be
ways.
done as one way?
It could be one way. It's just it's simply
Because I'm thinking if
an
you
example.
got two streets, Maple and Chestnut, with the same issue, one could be one way and one could be the other way.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Could you go to your last slide with the little purple arrows, please? Okay, I just have a question on that. So the bikes would be the only ones going in those directions? Or you would have like, can you explain that to me, please?
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of confused.
The way these the direction of these arrows are showing where a motor vehicle would have to go. They cannot.
Okay.
They would not be able to penetrate the intersections. Only non-motorized modes would be free flowing through those intersections.
So like, for instance, then on Belford, there'd be no motor vehicles on Belford?
You can use that street, but you would have to, come from Stewart, take a left, and then you couldn't go straight through, continuing south. You'd have
So
to
it'd be,
take a.
okay, I understand now. Thank you very
to-
much.
To control the flow.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegation, I appreciate that today's presentation was focused on the Breckin Hill neighborhood, but with the limited budget and limited resources, if the city were to move forward with piloting a project like this, or etc., would, in your eyes, the Breckin neighborhood be the neighborhood of choice for doing so, or is there areas that or neighborhoods that could be would be better suited for that because they already have stronger connections with other neighborhoods?
Maybe, I've only been here about a year and a half living here, so I couldn't say off the top of my head for sure which neighborhood would be an absolute excellent candidate, but knowing that Breckin Hill is, near the downtown, I would say it would be a good candidate. There's not too far as the town site development, so there's places that someone in this neighborhood could walk to or bike to, but is it safe? I don't think so. So it's an area that has places where it's close but not so safe to walk or bike to. So I think this would be a good candidate. Downtown neighborhoods, Harewood. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that would be something obviously that we'd have to look at quite thoroughly, I would say. But I wouldn't be able to answer that in an appropriate manner in this moment right now.
Thank you.
I'd have to study it, and I would, Tyler. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mr. Dixon. The next is a delegation from Janet Ismail regarding Labio supportive housing, security, and crime concerns.
Hello,
Good evening.
different subject. So I want to let you know about my amazing parents. They were in the back here last week or the week before. So I'm going to tell you a bit about them. My mom is 87 and my dad is 88. And in fact, there are over 500 elderly seniors living in 3 complexes on Long Lake at Country Club. There's Lakeside Gardens, there's Long Lake Chateau, and Berwick. The elderly seniors are of all levels of health and fitness. Buses take them to the mall, walking clubs, and they participate in individual walking. My mom and dad walk an average of 4 to 6 kilometers a day, and they're 87, 88. So they walk in their building, they live in Lakeside, they walk by the Long Lake area and to Country Club Mall. The reason we chose the area of Long Lake and Country Club Mall is for mom and dad to live because it's a nice area. It's quiet, it's safe, it's gorgeous, and I also live in that area. So our area is so nice, and it was safe there too. We had homeless, and even they were nice. Things have changed since Labio Housing went in. Our homeless are gone. Country Club now has security in the mall. We have to be careful of going out at night or coming in because it's just not safe. During the day, there are often thieves and drug-induced people. Sometimes they are strung out, so we need to be very careful. How does this impact seniors? Well, if an elderly person is knocked over, they're most likely going to the hospital and are probably not going to get out. So I'm trying to teach my mom and dad how to spot drug-induced people, how to spot the dangerous ones, need to not make eye contact if they're strung out, if they're flailing arms, get out of the way or duck, how to protect themselves. So how's it going? It's not going well. My mom and dad are really friendly. So they talk to everyone. If someone looks like they're having a problem, my dad asks if they need help. Dad picks the litter off the ground. He's 88, right? So he sees litter, he's going to pick it up. It doesn't work so well when it's needles. So Labio Supportive Housing is currently leased on leased land, as I understand it, chosen by the city with a timeline of, and it's temporary, of 2 to 5 years. And 2 to 5 years doesn't sound like a long time when you're younger, but it's more significant when you're in your late 80s. Mom, I asked her, will you still be walking to Country Club in 5 years? And she said, well, she'll be 92 and Dad will be 93 at that time. So this is really precious time. And I'm currently, my request here today is that the city change the current timeline of 2 to 5 years to look at 1 to 2 years, and to set it as a priority to move the Labio housing site. The city would provide monthly updates on prospective new land sites for the housing. And if anyone thinks it isn't a personal issue, I guarantee it is, as we've seen from people speaking up. The people are here because it's personal. I'm here because my mom and dad just about got knocked over when Tent City was at Port Place and they were going into the doctor. First my mom, and then my dad, as he was getting in the vehicle, just about got knocked over because there was a man jumping and flailing his arms. And so Dad got in, missed it, and he got in the vehicle, but it was a close one. So that's for me, and my homeless. So it's very personal. And the girl that had a letter, and Ken Clark read it a couple weeks ago, well, it's my neighbor. I parked next. What she didn't say in that letter is that their vehicle was stolen 2 weeks before Christmas. I was parked next to the vehicle at the time. So it is personal. I know, Mayor Krogh, did I say it right? Sorry. That you had mentioned before that you as council and mayor, you can't protect us. Well, maybe this is a way, at least something, right? And thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Hearing none, thank you. The next is a delegation from Joanne Sales regarding Broombrusters Invasive Plant Society. And I'm wondering, given that I believe they're from the north end, they might not be able to make it here tonight. Ms. Gurry?
We haven't heard from them, Your Worship, so I don't believe that they were able to make it. They were coming from Qualicum, so.
It's too bad, because it would have been a nice opportunity to thank them for all the work they've done. Hopefully they'll get on the delegation list again. The next is a delegation from Chrissy Forsyth regarding 2020 Labio temporary supportive housing.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for letting me speak in front of you guys again. I just feel like our city is in desperate need of some help at this point. I'm here to request on behalf of our community that the city facilitates a meeting with the RCMP, the Crown Council, city management, and city council. We as a community need to feel safe in our streets again. We have so much theft and break-ins and assaults happening in our area that it is getting very concerning. All of this is due to drug addicts needing their next fix. In the past month, Wesley Street has had 2 break-ins, one in the dental office January 13th, Shade Spa February 3rd. Tim Hortons had an armed robbery February 9th. January 28th, there was a home invasion on Labio. I was assaulted in the grab-and-go convenience store beside Wellington School on February 1st. He was found at 2020 Labio. He's not a resident there, but he is a friend. I tried to stop him from stealing from a convenience store, and he pushed me into a whole rack of chocolate bars. And I chased him, and that's where he got caught by a cop and the police dog, actually. So we've had 12 thefts and break-ins in our general area. This doesn't include the theft from stores at all. Best Buy has had over $2,000 worth of wireless speakers stolen since February 1st. Over 9 dash cameras in their last count that have gone missing. And this is just what they've got in their inventory. This isn't what people got out of the store. So now Best Buy is paying their manager to stand at the front door and stop people from coming in before they even get in. And that is now her job. So now she doesn't get her commission sales because she's standing there protecting their belongings. How is anybody ever supposed to get a raise? How are these businesses going to get ahead? Front Runners has had, in a month, has had as much clothing stolen out of their store as all of last year. Like, business-wise, this is not sustainable for this area. There's high school kids. They're scared to even take their backpacks off in Tim Hortons. I have pictures of blood splatter all over the walls in Tim Hortons bathrooms. They don't have needle dispensers. This neighborhood is not equipped to deal with this. I'm sorry, but it's not. Like, there needs to be some rules in place at this facility. It is a free-for-all. There's no gates. They're in and out all night. The security hides in his car, rolls up his window. There was a man that got attacked on the EN Trail, and I had to go and find his wife. And she went back to the Labio housing because she lives there. And the security guard looked at me and said, I don't know any of these people, and I'm not getting out of my car, and rolled up his window. There was nobody working there. I had to wait for some people that were coming in there so I could try and make sure that this man's wife was safe, because there was a crazy guy, that was hurting people. And then otherwise I'm gonna go and look for this woman by myself? Like, this isn't working, you guys. Like, if there's no rules in place, like the one at Terminal, like, they need to go. Or they need, like, the addicts need some help from VHA.
And 1 minute, Ms. Forsyth.
Like, I don't know what to do here. Like, we can't sit here and sugarcoat the fact that the crime rate hasn't changed, because that is absolute crap. And you guys know it just as well as we do. So convincing the community that nothing is happening is not true, because I have more than enough proof, and I have video, and I have pictures, and I even have people that are living in Labio that are doing this. I don't know how much more proof as a community we can provide to you guys to show you how much we care about our area. I don't know what else to do. But I'm gonna keep coming back until something changes. That's all I have to say about that. So, any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Forsyth. Has all this information that you presented tonight in the way of crimes gone to the RCMP?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep,
they
they've been
have it all
called.
on file. Okay,
Yep.
perfect, thank you.
And the stats on the robberies and stuff like that, they're all on the crime map, because it's been updated now,
Okay,
so.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Forsyth. Have you taken your concerns to the provider, Pacifica Housing?
Yep, I have. She
And-
was sick. She didn't go to work for a while. I did go to have a meeting with her. She kind of declined at this point. There's definitely some safety issues that are going on there. They have like a little orange trailer that the workers there stay in, and they don't really come out. I don't know if any of you noticed that, but there's like a
When-
security guard that blocks the gate there, and then it's, you just come and go as you please, shopping carts, stolen bikes. There's a stack of stolen bikes that are sitting there outside. So,
And just follow up then, if you haven't been satisfied with Pacific Housing, have you looked at maybe talking to BC Housing, who actually oversees the project?
I have actually, and I've sent letters to the Attorney General's office. I've sent emails. I've definitely been doing my homework on this, and I've gotten zero response from anybody.
Thank you. I'm sorry, and the community has to go through with this, and hopefully we can try and find some way to deal with it. Thank you.
Well, I find that if Island Crisis Care has done the due diligence in having the security, like, I don't feel like it's right that 10 people that have formed a pack mentality living down at Tent City for the last 9 months and that have formed their own family, which is fine. We understand that. They need to protect each other. They're street people. That's all they have. But it's not a very good feeling when you see 10 of them coming out all dressed in black with backpacks at midnight. What do you think's gonna happen in your neighborhood? Are you all gonna sleep very good? Probably not. Like, it's just, you're not gonna sleep well knowing that that's going on outside your house. And that's what's going on in our neighborhood. Everybody that lives along the backside of Rock City has cameras on the outside of their house now. They've lived there for 30, 40 years. They've never had a camera in their life. So it's gonna be a chain reaction. And with the mall having to pay for all the security, people are gonna lose their jobs. People are never gonna get raises. If you're gonna try and combat homelessness, it's not helping by making other people suffer. So, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Please. I'm sorry, we're not either clapping nor jeering. If you wish to do that, you'll have to find another forum. I'm sorry. The delegation next, Marty Roberts and Hillary Harlow regarding 1400 Wingrove. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. We were here this time last year trying to get 1400 Wingrove, the Enrico building, taken down. One of the city councilors asked the question, if they okayed the 6 variances, one being 41 parking spots that they lacked, would it be taken down by September 2018? In the haste to put through, they did it in one meeting, basically saying they could build it on the footprint of the 1980 building using existing foundation. We have been told by an engineer that this is nowhere close to code. If this had been built with a new foundation, it would have required a second meeting in front of council, and it would have never gone through. I'll let you continue.
Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I have talked to the gentleman that owns this last week. I asked him, was he going to take it down or was he going to build? And he said he'd sooner sell it. He doesn't want to spend $1.5 million right now. So we were stuck there looking at this for years again, an eyesore with criminals going in and out with stolen property, neighbours putting up cameras. Basically, he's getting away with everything here. got everything in the last council, gave away the farm, he left the whole way to the bank. My neighbour had to drop 250,000 off his property because nobody wants to buy it and build beside that eyesore. He's gone here with the taxes. He's paid little or no taxes. His place is valued at 316,000, less than my house. The city has to stamp every year saying there's 75% damage done to this, before he can get away with that. Yes, the architect got up here in the meeting and said there's only 25% damage done. How can this be? There's people working hard every day to rear the family, educate them, paying all their taxes, and this guy gets away. BC Assessment said if he gets a permit, everything, his taxes goes up. Again, the city doesn't have this reported. He's getting away with his taxes again this year. How much more do we have to put up with looking at this? People going in there, we're calling the police, they're sick and tired coming to the place. I think the police should be investigating how all this is happening, how somebody can have so much political clout as to get away with this for nearly 6 years. We're sick and tired of looking at it, tear it down. What else do you want them to do? He's laughed the whole way to the bank. We have to put up with it all the time. Nobody can sell their property. And he doesn't care. When we got on to him once, you're going to do something, he brought in a couple of kids to make out he was knocking it down. And they know nothing about it. If I had called workers' comp on him, he would have been in huge trouble. There's absolutely no reason why it's been opened there for months. I have lists of how long it's been not secured. The 23rd
of
December to the 2nd of February.
Was one incident alone.
Alone, all that time. Keep calling him, he comes down to fix it. Oh, we're going to secure it. The city tells me he's going to secure it. He comes down, he doesn't even have nails to nail up a board. He's to go begging off the neighbours. How much interest does he have in securing anything here? Windows is broken it. He doesn't give a tinker's damn about people. This is the jewel of Nanaimo. And I can tell you one thing, there's one bloody black mark on it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. And again, thank you before appearing. I've sat through this for a few years and understand your concerns. Have you been reporting these to the firemen or to the fire safety as well as the bylaws as previously had been done?
I haven't spoken to the fire people for quite a while because we spoke to them beforehand and then they come in and they promised to do everything when they were getting their permit. That was the end of that. Nothing happened again.
We were told even when we complained to the city, they have a very active demolition permit in place.
He told me 2 weeks ago he had no permit from the city.
And then he said he did.
Then he come back then last week and he said, oh, well, I did get the permit now. This is a joke. The man got no intention of doing anything and the city is bending backwards over forwards to oblige him so he doesn't have to pay taxes like the rest of us.
Thank you very much. I'll have some questions for staff after, please, Your Worship.
Thank you.
One more thing. When we did go through this before, when we asked the bylaw officer to get the graffiti taken off of it, and we were tired going to him, he told us he could do no more and we'd have to go to the top. And we went to the top last year. What did we get? We're at the top this time. Please do something about it. Tear it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Follow up through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Lindsay. Can you confirm if there is a demolition permit?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Councillor Armstrong. In addition to a demolition permit that has been applied for, the owner has applied for a permit to rebuild the property, and that application came in just before Christmas, just December.
So there is an ongoing process which hopefully will address the concerns raised?
Well, the demolition permit could be acted on in short order. It's really at the owner's discretion. The building permit we would hope to have eligible for issuance within the next couple of months.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. And the final delegation is Heather and Edward Ambo regarding property safety costs.
Hi again.
Good evening.
So originally I wanted to bring to your attention some values regarding the market rents that I brought up last week, but I was actually able to pass those off to Dale. I actually think you received those today through Lisa. So part of what I was going to discuss related to security in the neighborhood is actually just goes to the things that Chrissy Forsyth just spoke about. So you're very aware of all the issues that are going on in our neighborhood. We keep coming forward about them. And there is a general consensus, particularly on social media, but also in the groups that I deal with, that the city isn't doing anything. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that is the attitude of people. And I want to ask you today that if a couple councilors could come forward and be the liaison for people with their concerns regarding Labio. Terminal, I don't know about Terminal just because it's not my neighborhood, so I only hear what they're saying, but there's a lack of communication, and we keep getting dismissed about the things that are happening in our neighborhood. I mean, Max guy got punched in the face the other day, and they traced him back to Labio. These things, people are calling them innuendos and rumor, but they're actually things that are happening, and we're out doing patrols regularly, and it's gotten so bad that some people are concerned about backlash from the patrols that we're doing. So this is a bigger issue than just petty crime and thieving. This has to do with the transfer of money and drugs that's going on in Labio. Yes, I've spoken to BC Housing, Heidi Hartman. Yes, I'm in regular contact with Sharon McDonald from Pacifica. So, and I've tried to start the block watch. I'm still waiting for them to come return to me to give me our tags so we can get it going in our buildings and a couple other buildings in the neighborhood. So I think that to move forward, because I spoke to you, Councillor Hemmons, today, to move forward, we have to come together because this isn't two sides. And I say this time and time again. This isn't about, do we want it, don't we want it? This has to work. These people are with us. We want them part of our community. It's important we're inclusive. But when we have to deal with the criminals, that's the problem. And they are identified in the facility. And we're just all kind of banging our heads about what we can do. And we have all this information. We are supposed to have a liaison officer, actually Constable Sheriff from Labio. I've emailed and messaged him. I have yet to hear from him. So you did hear today at the presentation that it's important for City Council to communicate with the people in their neighborhood, particularly about homelessness, as well as affordable housing. So I'm asking you today if two councillors could come forward and actually represent us, some people, that we can come to you and share what's going on with you. Because, we come every week, and I know not that you're tired of hearing about it, but it does get redundant, and sometimes things are redundant, they get missed. And if we just had a couple people that we could be dealing with, that we know are hearing what we're saying, and they're letting us know if there's anything happening, that would be huge in the community. Because people feel like nothing's happening, and the concern is that there's going to be major backlash because people are so angry, and that's actually from both sides. That's a potential. And there's a whole bunch of us that really want to prevent that. So I'm wondering if somebody can come forward today. Say you'll be the liaison for us at the Labio site. 2 councillors, split it between you. Yeah, that's my question. We need correspondence. We need some transparency and correspondence. And this is from people that are actually communicating with all the people that we need to. And I'm wondering, I don't know if you have to make a motion or someone can just volunteer to come forward and let us communicate with you. So yeah, that's my request.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Ambo. I have actually 2 questions, or 2 questions and an offer. First of all, we were told prior to these being set up that there would have neighborhood meetings with people in the area. To your knowledge, has that happened with this particular site?
So yes, I'm actually the chairperson of that Community Advisory Council, and there are a large group of people from the city that are there, which is amazing, but there's still sources of information that we have that need to be shared regarding the activities that are going on in the neighborhood coming from Labio. And And that's what people are concerned about because it's the crime. And that's what needs to be addressed. There are all kinds of things addressed at that meeting, and the meetings are actually really productive and good. But we need someone that we can speak to specifically that can show us some justification of what we're feeling and recognize that we're actually going through what's happening without dismissing it. That's not just my opinion, it's general
No, that's fine.
consensus.
So I don't know what the process is here, but I have, many years ago, been kind of a chair of a neighborhood group that was having issues, not to that extent, but we're having issues with youth. And so if it is required, I'm quite happy to step forward. I'll bring my referee's whistle.
That's awesome. I'm gonna cry.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. And when you're asking for information, I believe once you get your block watch up and running, that would be one way to get information is through the block watch, as whoever the captain is through the RCMP.
That would be me.
Okay, yeah, so I believe that would happen, like there's a process which will be explained to you that the information will get out to you from the RCMP. And the second thing is when you said you haven't heard from the liaison officer, then I would suggest you follow up again. And if not, we've had, I think he's left, but Superintendent Miller is also.
I brought it to his attention
Okay,
today.
that's great. I was going to say, because we as council don't have control over the police. We can request stuff, but any issues with the police belong with the police. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just in terms of the request, I certainly sympathize and understand the reason for the request, but I would respectfully suggest that this is something that council needs to talk about amongst ourselves.
I understand.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me again.
Next item is reports. The New Horizons for Seniors Grant. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an application to, a report seeking council support for the city to participate in an expression for interest to the federal government that could lead to an application for funding, in this case with United Way, for the continuation of the New Horizons for Seniors program. This is a program that the city had previously received funds for that expired this year, so it was a 3-year program. And at this point, it looks like they are opening the opportunity for a 5-year ask. As I stated, the city would participate in the expression of interest application. At this point, we've identified monies that we would use for the Living Speakers series. So this is a series that John Horn in the Social Planning Department helped coordinate for the last 3 years, which was an opportunity for seniors to come out and hear from others and hear their stories and their experiences. And it was a very successful event. With this money, if it was successful, we believe we could hold 3 of these events for the next 5 years. So at this point, it's just simply seeking council support to proceed with the response to the expression of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
We'll move for staff recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
I'm in favor of this motion. I'm in favor of this motion, and I also would like council and staff to know, and the public, that I'm no longer a board member of the United Way, so I can now speak on these things. So.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember, I did read this earlier, but Ms. Mercer's not here, but I'm assuming this is something in the current budget, or is this in addition to?
Mr. Lindsay?
Your Worship, this is simply at this point just an expression of interest. If we were successful ultimately in obtaining the grant, it would be the grant monies that would be sufficient to provide a continuation of the program.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none? Carried. Thank you. The next is short-term rental accommodation. Again, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this evening, this is just simply a report for information for council. And as we talked about this afternoon, the city recently adopted an affordable housing strategy and looked at a number of ways to address housing affordability across our community. One of the specific items that was identified through the engagement process and through the consultation that we did through this process, identified a need to look at and further regulate short-term rental accommodation. So in other words, Airbnbs. as an example of one online platform. The concerns raised about the proliferation of these types of rentals and the impact that it has on rental availability within the community. The strategy recommended a number of actions to regulate short-term accommodations. So the next steps are that staff would be doing further research on best practices, holding some engagement in the community and with stakeholders, ultimately opening it up to the community to provide their input before we return to council for any recommendations for amendments to our bylaw.
Thanks very much, Ms. Lindsay. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I have two questions. Number one, I understand that this is under appeal in Ontario, that there's a court decision is supposed to be rendered in August of 2019. Is there any challenges on this legislation in BC that you're aware of?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Ontario case. We can certainly look into that and include it as part of our follow-up. Also not aware of any current cases, and I assume you're speaking to the MRDT funding, or are you
No,
speaking
Ontario's, everything's on hold in Ontario right now while the bylaw's been challenged. I just researched it, so that was my question, and I couldn't find anything for BC because I saw that Vancouver was looking at putting theirs on hold until the decision came out of Ontario. So that was my question, number one, so just for something to be aware of. And my second question is again, doing the research, there's a lot of issues around these bylaws are great, but is there enforcement clauses, and who's going to do the enforcement? Does it require the addition of extra bylaw officers? Thank you.
Absolutely, Your Worship. I mean, those are both issues, the legal consequences, the financial implications. Those are all things we'd have to look at before we recommended any amendments to our bylaws. Anytime we bring in a new regulation, we want to make sure that it's effective and also enforceable. So those issues will have to be addressed before we bring back any recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Are there any changes in mill rate with regard to a property becoming not just residential, but being a bed and breakfast and one of these new short-term rentals?
Not at this point, to the best of my understanding, no.
Okay, so it's basically taxes are based on assessment of the property at residential mill rate?
Your Worship, that's correct. I think this is one of those areas that's evolving, and just recently the province has brought in taxation, for example, of these operations, which didn't exist before. So I think with the licensing and taxation, that's something that may be further explored, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I think Mr. Lindsay just answered my question, which was what is the role of the provincial government in this? Because I thought, and I believe you indicate in your report, that they have reached agreement with Airbnb at least to collect taxation and then pass some of it along to us.
Your Worship, they reached agreement on the taxation, but also the portion that's passed on to the city is the MRDT funding. So they'll be collecting those monies, and then that would be transferred to the city. At this point, the city, at least in the short term, has allocated those funds to go to affordable housing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through the chair, just for clarification, on the first page under recommending 7 actions, it talks about less than 30 days to dwelling units where the owner is currently residing either in the main dwelling or the secondary suite. Is the intent the same as what the bylaw is, so that I think it's Kamloops, where definitely it would have to be in the principal residence. They couldn't have a secondary suite that they could rent out. They have to be living there in order to have the room rental or the Airbnb.
And again, this is early days, so I mean, these are just suggestions that came out of the strategy, and part of this process would be to flesh those out and determine exactly what the rules are to be. What I would say is that, Your Worship, a number of the municipalities have made that a condition, and that has to be occupied not necessarily by the owner, but the primary residence of the operator.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is Mr. Sims, the consultation plan single-use checkout bags regulation. Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, thank you very much. I'm pleased to introduce David Thompson, our Manager of Sanitation and Recycling. Mr. Thompson's been working on the plastic bag regulation in accordance with Council's direction of last year. So he's got a brief presentation that'll just help flesh this out for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. To recap our work to date, in December of 2017, previous council issued direction to staff to provide options on banning plastic bags. February 2018, we hit the pause button, so to speak, pending outcomes of a court decision that was before the Supreme Court, the Canadian Plastic Bag Association versus the City of Victoria. June 2018, that case was decided in the city's favor and confirmed that cities have the authority to regulate business in this manner. November 2018, we brought back options to council, and at that point in time, we were requested to develop a communications plan, and that brings us to today. In that intervening period, we have reached out to a number of parties, including the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, for their input, confirming that businesses are generally aware of this issue, and we engage in some preliminary discussions with their CEO to determine what kind of needs and supports would be required in a process of this nature. We also reached out to the City of Victoria and the District of Saanich to understand what their engagement processes looked like and have a discussion on some of the lessons learned through those processes. The objective is to inform, educate, and listen, and those objectives span both the development of the regulation and the implementation. So primarily we listening and informing residents and businesses in the first phase, and then providing education after adoption of the regulation. So a number of audiences that we're going to be speaking to and looking to hear from, both within Nanaimo and outside of Nanaimo. It was very loud and clear that Nanaimo is a shopping destination for many residents who do not live in the city, so we definitely want to make sure that we engage them in the process and understand what their needs might be. Just to hit a few of the highlights on what is contained in the regulation, and we would be seeking to engage people on. The definition of a checkout bag is included. It includes, it discusses the characteristics of paper bags, plastic bags, and reusable bags. The bylaw or the regulation prohibits the provision of a plastic bag as a checkout bag. And it does set minimum fees for the provision of a paper or a reusable bag. Again, keeping in mind the goal of this entire process is to reduce the impact of plastic bags on our municipal services, recycling, contamination, and litter by encouraging the increased use of durable, reusable checkout bags. There are some exceptions within this regulation, this planned regulation, that would allow for plastic bags to be used for loose bulk items, seafoods, meats, laundry, large items, and a few other exceptions. Notably, it does not prohibit the reuse of a plastic checkout bag. We hear stories of, bags of bags under the kitchen sink. You can keep reusing those bags until they fall apart. It does include a 6-month transition period from the time that the bylaw is adopted to the time that it would become enforceable. So how are we going to undertake this engagement? We anticipate a duration of engagement of about 3 months. Right now it's bookmarked for sort of the March to June timeframe. For the consultation, the budget associated with that is a little over $8,000, and then for the education component, the budget associated with that is a little over $7,000. And we have, as I said earlier, earmarked 6 months for that transition period to focus on education, getting residents and businesses fully up to speed with respect to the bylaw. And that is our engagement plan. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for your work and the work of staff on this. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much. I just was reading, I don't know how accurate is it, there's going to be a Court of Appeal hearing on this. Are we monitoring that to see what the Court of Appeal rules before we do our bylaw?
We are aware of a recently filed appeal for the City of Victoria case. It has been brought to our attention by the city, and we've passed that information along to our legal counsel.
I have a follow-up, if I may. In that challenge, do you know if they're going to be asking for restitution? Because that would be my concern if we were to put a bylaw in and then a restitution amount is granted by the courts that could be upwards in the millions.
The appeal was only recently filed. I don't think we have any information on that.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Thorpe, I hit it so quickly that you came off the list.
Oh, that's all right. Can I get back on the list?
Go ahead.
Thank you
Punch your
very
mic.
much. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Thompson. I'll be supporting the staff recommendation on this issue. However, I do have some concerns about wording. And I go back to the original motion which the previous council made, I believe. And that wording was to implement or adopt and implement a new bylaw to regulate the use of single-use checkout bags. And I emphasize the word regulate. The word ban was not used. And to me, that has a very simplistic connotation, which I'm not sure I support. So I know that's straying from the recommendation in tonight's report, and again, I do support the consultation aspect of this, but I would like to be assured that we're looking towards some type of regulation rather than simply an outright ban.
I'd have to go back and look at the wording on the original, but certainly I recognize that this has evolved since that time, and you know, we're certainly willing to have that conversation, I think, with the public as to what regulate means.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Thompson. I'm not sure this is the place to bring it up, but that's never stopped me before, so I'll give it a shot. Many of you may know that I was involved in the, because my wife is the secretary of the Navy League, involved in a collection process of plastic bags this past weekend. And I'd like to report that, I forget the volume size of the bags we put them in, but they're great big bags that garden waste goes in. We filled 40 of those with plastic bags that we took to be recycled. So in my mind, there is some potential for recycling these. And the next step, as an individual, not a councillor, I would like to proceed to see if Recycle BC has any ideas of actually bringing this to more of a deposit type collection. And a couple other things, if I may. The thing that I did a little research on it, and you may well be aware of it already, and I apologize if you are, but there's a company in Manitoba called Regen Composite that set up a program with schools in Manitoba, or Winnipeg, I should say, where they got the kids to bring in single-use plastic bags, and they collected them. They used them in making benches and chairs, that type of thing, which I'm sure you're aware of. The neat thing about it was, rather than giving the kids candy money, they made each student a Frisbee out of the recycled plastic, which I thought was somewhat novel. They also have a website depicting their different products that they make out of the, once they pelletize all the plastic, including the single-use bags. So my actual question is, if a bylaw was passed, and we, through economic development and Recycle BC, determined that it probably wasn't the wisest thing to do, is there a method for rescinding that bylaw?
Through the chair, Councillor Turley, I try and unpack a few of those things. With respect to recycling of plastic bags, Recycle BC, as you're aware, does include these in their program. What we find at the municipal level, however, is that single-use plastic bags are a significant source of contamination in the material we collect from curbside. So that's definitely, you know, an opportunity for improvement if we can get those bags out of our process and directed to the depot where they're supposed to go. It helps us out. It also helps the recycler out. As for Recycle BC's appetite for taking on deposits for single-use plastic bags, I obviously can't comment.
Yeah, no, I didn't expect you to. My question was, if that does prove to be the case, is there an ability, if the bylaw goes through with a regulation, is there an ability to rescind it if we find that there is a market for these bags, I guess is the question I have. I know this is probably a premature question, but it would make me feel more comfortable.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Turley, yes, there's always an option to rescind the bylaw. You have a bylaw to then rescind the bylaw. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I will be supporting this. Just a few points that I'd like to make. I also caught the ban versus regulation that Councillor Thorpe did, and I think it's really important that we're very clear. Are we looking to ban plastic bags, or are we looking to regulate them? I think how we go out into the public. So in the Zenny, the second attachment to that, it talks about a ban. I think we also talk about the damage to public infrastructure and the municipal burden of having excess plastic bags, but for me, the reason I will be supporting this in general is because I think the burden on the environment overall is what's motivating me as we see an increase in plastic in our oceans. For me, that's what's motivating me, so I would like to see that reflected in how we're expressing that to the community. Victoria did do a very comprehensive consultation process, and so I was actually on the fence whether we needed to consult about this or not, but after hearing from Councillor Turley about the impact to small businesses, I felt compelled that this was probably the right path forward. But I would like to see us focus on small businesses. I wouldn't want to see us going and consulting with Thrifty Foods and Country Kosher, because those folks were probably part of the consultation process in Victoria, and we could just learn from that. And the other piece, why are we consulting with folks who don't live in Nanaimo?
Through the chair, what has become apparent in our discussion with others, including the Chamber of Commerce, is that Nanaimo is a shopping hub. Certainly, it was timely this conversation was happening around Christmas shopping period, and one of the stories that was relayed to me was Woodgrove Shopping Center, for example, is a draw for people living on the Sunshine Coast, living up and down the island as a shopping destination. So there are other island initiatives that are advertised on the ferries, for instance, from people coming over. Here's things you need to know about what's happening on the island. So that was just something that we need to be aware of. And obviously, the impact on that, the last thing you want to do from a commercial perspective is to have shoppers come in and then be surprised by the local regulations that they're unprepared to deal with.
Sorry, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I was going to move the staff recommendation as printed.
And you're perfectly permitted to do that, and seconded by Councillor Gesselbrock.
And just to speak to it, as others have, I didn't find the ban. I was going by the regulate on the purpose of the report, but this is all about consultation. So I'm just going to say I move that we consult.
And Councillor Gesselbrock, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to staff, thank you very much for putting together this bylaw and the consultation plan. I appreciate that the bylaw wasn't reinventing the wheel and following sort of what all the work that Victoria has done. It's included a lot of consultation already with business. I'm excited about the consultation process. I think as an exercise to be reaching out to business and having a discussion about materials and how we're operating as a community to look at reducing our waste and maybe looking at different ways that we're using things that we're normally doing every day that's going to landfill. And I think hopefully this conversation will be expanded, and the concept of really trying to work on developing a circular economy where We're actively recycling what we need to. We're upstream, we're banning materials that there's no way to reprocess it, and then we're also building off industry of these recycled materials that Councillor Turley is talking about with the plastic bags. So I'll be supporting this motion and look forward to more conversation on it. Thank you.
Councillor Turley again?
Yes, thank you. I know I'm not supposed to speak twice, but I've got something, okay? So the question I have, and I certainly am in favor of significant consultation with the business community and others. The one area that I like to say proves my point is that, for example, in the floral business, there's 2 uses of plastic bags here that are not mentioned as exemptions, and they could be significant issues for that business if they're not included. I can let you know what they are later, that's no problem. But during the process, hopefully each different type of business has the ability for input. So, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do think this is a positive step for the environment, but I'm quite cognizant of the fact that the court ruling is very clear that municipalities have the powers to ban, or not ban, regulate plastic bags due to their impact on municipal services and nothing that exceeds that. So it's on that grounds that I will be supporting this motion. Because I think I'm guilty of it as well, contamination of the soft plastics, particular plastic bags in the recycle stream. It happens, and if we can sort of cut that off at the source, I think it's helps protect the discount that we do get for hopefully not having contaminated material, and also, you know, reducing some impact on the landfill.
Councillor Martman. You're
Oh,
okay?
no.
Good. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I'm in favor of this motion. I have one question, though, regarding the how it's funded. And we're funding it out of general taxation. Is there someplace we can find $15,000 we don't have to go back to the taxpayers for? Do we have some options?
Your Worship, Finance Department did review this, and I believe they were thinking it could be funded from existing surplus as opposed to another cost center.
So if we pass this motion, does that mean that it's definitely coming out of taxation, or we have some options?
Your Worship, this is a recommendation to take it forward to council, and at that time we can clarify the funding source.
Appreciate that, thanks. Okay.
I think we have the money.
I know we do. I do.
Well, we've all had a good go at this. All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Seeing none, motion carried unanimously. Thank you. The next is the Transportation Update 2019. Mr. Sims, and I believe Mr. Rose is going to assist.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Mr. Rose will be proceeding momentarily to the podium, but this was among the many topics that we're certainly aware Council is very interested in. We accelerated the actual term, you know, with the previous delegations that were on the agenda this evening, thinking that this is a good opportunity to speak to about what our process is, because oftentimes Council will receive, you know, I want a crosswalk kind of demands, and we can sort of reflect some of the transportation planning process as well as the projects that are in front of you. Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose, thank you.
So, as Mr. Sims said, we've had a few conversations about transportation already tonight. So maybe a little bit of my thunder's been stolen, but wanted to talk to you about what we're going to be doing in 2019. It's going to be a very busy year. The report spoke to some of those things. It also spoke to some of the processes and systems that we have in place already. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to also elaborate on some of those and present to you guys what it is we do. So within the Transportation Department, we really have two sides to the coin. We have the strategic planning and we've got the transportation management. So this is sort of the long-range visioning and the day-to-day. And the strategic planning, this is where we monitor growth and shift, create some policy and priorities, and we try and keep tabs on new trends. So within that, we've created the Transportation Master Plan. We are looking at updating our design standards, and we're creating implementation strategies and larger scale concept plans for corridors and for intersections. Within the transportation management, as I noted, this is more of our day-to-day stuff. So this is when we receive calls from the public, raising concerns to us. This is how we are made aware of acute concerns. And so with that, we've got a process to monitor and track these things. Really, this is the sort of, as I sort of said, the acute safety and mobility issues. Through our Transportation Master Plan, we identified some core principles and some priorities. You've already seen one of these tonight, so that's fortunate, but the principles are the safety, mobility, accessibility, connectivity, sustainability, and affordability. We need a transportation system that's safe for everybody. That's no debate, no discussion. Mobility. We want people of all ages and all abilities to have choice when they're moving. I want my kids to be able to walk, bike, take the bus, whatever it is they want to do. I want my parents to be able to do the same thing. Taking off on that, we also need to have an accessible transportation system. We need to remove the barriers. So whether that's lighting or sidewalks or changes to our trail standards, we need to incorporate those things to ensure everybody has access. Connectivity speaks to providing everybody with strong links between where they are and where they want to be. In order to reduce the demand on our system, we really want to provide these strong links and shorten the distance. So getting into land use planning, when we create shorter travel distances, people are less likely to get in their cars. They're more likely to walk and bike. Sustainability, providing a sustainable transportation system just provides greater health and well-being to our system. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We can create a healthier, active lifestyle that keeps people moving throughout their lives. Affordability is an interesting one because it has two perspectives. One is the city's perspective, and that is what can we do to our system within our means? How can we provide all of these needs to the community while still working within our parameters? The other side was brought to my attention again this morning by somebody, and that is the cost to the general public to move. Somebody noted to me that it's about $10,000 a year to own and maintain a car. And for a lot of people, that's a significant amount of their income. And when you're balancing living with mobility, we need to find ways to bridge that gap. I touched briefly on creating areas where people won't have to travel as far. This here is an excerpt from our Transportation Master Plan. These are our mobility hubs. They echo the sentiments of the urban nodes in the OCP. And these are areas that we're looking to densify land use and create areas where people can live, work, and recreate. Ideally, these are areas where people won't have to travel outside of them, and so when traveling within them, they will be able to walk, ride their bikes, scooters, etc. To support all of these, we need to have a strong internodal transportation network, and this is where having a strong integration with our transit system is key. Through the Transportation Master Plan, we knew that we were predicting that we're going to see about a 50% growth in daily trips by 2041. This is something that we need to anticipate and manage. And the strategy that we've opted to pursue is promoting active transportation. We want to minimize the increase in vehicle trips and maximize the increase in walking, biking, and transit. changing gears here to our transportation management. So this is something that pretty much all of our staff in the department are dealing with on a daily basis. In 2018, we received just over 200 calls with requests for parking concerns, walking concerns, speeding concerns. You'll note there that the parking is highlighted as being the highest single call demand. It's interesting, hearkening back to the presentation that just came in. In my report, I actually noted that speeding and pedestrian were first and second, and what that was based on was combining the crosswalk and sidewalk calls and the speeding and speed bump calls. These are the categories that we store them in our database. So on the right is a map of our database. So the process we have in place right now is when people call in, we log the information, we gather the name, what the concerns are, and then are able to track what we've done, how we've done it, what the conclusion was. All the green dots are issues that have been received and responded to and closed. The red ones are still outstanding. This is not a current map. This was from, I think, back in December, but it's not terribly different. We still have a backlog of a little over 100 issues that we're dealing with. So, one of the things that we like to, or the approach that we like to take when we get these calls is applying the principles of the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. Typically, when we go out to review something, we find that the road has been engineered as it should be. We don't typically find dramatic shortfalls in the design of it. Sometimes there's some visibility issues with vegetation, but that's usually the extent of it. Most commonly, what we find is that people are not actually using the roads as they're intended. So people are speeding, people are walking and biking where we would prefer them not to be. And so with that, it's really hard to engineer that out. So one of the more common ways that we approach this is through our education, engagement, and enforcement. These pictures here, these images here, are pieces from some of our education programs that have been going on. Over the last year, we've been going out with the school district and doing active route to school planning at 4 schools. And so this has involved a significant amount of data capture. We've gone out and we've done heat maps for each of the schools to figure out where people are going, work through with the school and the PAC as to what some of their concerns are. Tried to provide some options through education and training to give kids and parents comforts knowing that there are ways to move through the community. This was a graphic that the district in North Van, or the school district, the North Van School District prepared. But really what this is giving kids the life skills to continue to move. And this is something that we're really hoping to continue to pursue. We've got a task this year to work with the school district, which I'll mention in a little bit. The other side is some more promotional, a little bit of education as well. So in the last year, we've done 2 pedestrian safety days. Our first one was on the ICBC Be Safe, Be Seen campaign, and that was going into November. Darker nights, less, visibility wasn't as good. And so we went out with the RCMP and ICBC down to the intersection just over here on Albert and Victoria Crescent and spent a lunch hour helping give people some reflectors, make sure that they're crossing the street safely, giving them some tips, make eye contact with the drivers, don't go anywhere until you see that they've stopped and they see you. We had a second one this past fall at Dufferin and Bowen. And that was to really increase pedestrian awareness of what's going on around them. When we do our site assessments for calls to review the situations, it's interesting how often we see pedestrians head down, reading their phone, earbuds in, just walk straight across the road. So, we spend a lot of time looking at drivers saying you're speeding and you're not driving to the conditions, but we need to make sure that pedestrians are just as aware and just as conscious of what's going on around them to make sure that our roads are safe. Just taking a step back here to planning of our network. I was able to dig up these pictures from a few years ago from downtown. And one of the things that you see that's key about this is a balance. So we've got sidewalks, we do have some cars, we have a lot of business frontages, but it provides a real, there's a much stronger sense of place and intermixing of all the needs of the community. One of the presentations touched earlier on the areas of the community that developed through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and kind of missed some of the important criteria that we're now seeing the needs for. These are some aerial photographs of the Harewood Mall area, and you can see sort of time after time the continued growth and development, but these were all happening under improvement districts. And this is the standards there were basically local rural roads with very few amenities for anything other than cars. And so these are the areas that we predominantly get requests for sidewalks and for traffic calming and for things of that nature, because they were designed when car was king. And that was the primary mode of transportation and how people envisioned to move through the future. So some challenges and opportunities. Challenges are fundamentally the change in priorities of the community. We are shifting out of a car-centric community and moving into active transportation. We're hearing a lot from people that they want to walk, ride, take transit whenever possible. And so that is the priority of our transportation master plan. That is where we want people to move, and that is how we're trying to support people to move. One of the challenges with that is resources. And when we look at all of the areas that came into the city through amalgamation that were improvement districts, they did not come with complete streets. They came with very rural standards. And so trying to bridge the gap between what our expectations are now and what they were then is a pretty strong divide. And so we need to find a way to implement the strategies that we want to move forward with active transportation into these neighborhoods and try and find ways to give people the comfort of being able to walk and ride through these neighborhoods while supporting them with very strategic transportation infrastructure upgrades to bridge those larger gaps. One of the biggest opportunities that I've found over the last 2 years or so is collaboration. There are lots of agencies that want to work with us to do these things. We've been working with the school district heavily for the last 2 years with Active Routes to School. We've been working with the RDN Transit to find ways to better integrate transit into our mobility system. We've been putting new bus shelters in annually. We've also been working with senior governments and ICBC to gain grant funding. So we've applied for Bike BC funding for at least the last 4 years. We've been successful with most of those. We've got grant funding from ICBC through the Road Improvement Program every year for pretty much as long as that program's been in existence, which I think is a little over 10 years now. One of the other really important things was something that was brought up a couple of months ago, and that's, I've noted here, is advancement in technology, but one of the real big challenges that we have is knowing where people move regularly. Through the Transportation Master Plan, we did trip surveys. So we actually sat down with people and asked them how they move through the community. How do you get to and from work? How do you go into and from the grocery stores? And jotted it all down and documented it and populated our stats with that. But It's really important for us to be able to have a much more dynamic system. So starting in 2020, we've got plans to develop an active transportation data collection system. That's going to be coupled with our active transportation plan, which is another layer into our transportation master plan. And that also is going to dovetail with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. And one of the reasons that, or one of the, excuse me, one of the key points to having all of those come together is to stitch the fabric of mobility together. We can't differentiate between recreation and transportation. Just as many people use the ENN trail to commute as they do to go for a Sunday ride. And there's lots of opportunities like that. There's trails through Bowen Park, there's Wally Creek in the north end. That was a hot topic with some of the schools as to getting mobility to and from. So being able to tap into that and then to capture that data and then push it back out to our staff and then provide feedback to the community through technology is going to be one of our real stepping stones for us. Some of the projects we've worked on in the past, probably you've seen most of them: Bowen Road, Boundary, Harewood Bikeway, the first 3 phases, Dover Turner, Victoria, and we've added new transit shelters pretty much annually for the last 3 years. I've also included a history of our expenditures on active transportation. There's not a real strong trend there, but you can see that we have made some significant investments. So I'm going to continue to do that. Now the fun stuff, what we're doing this year. So two of the biggest projects we're taking on this year are complete street standards. For probably, well, since just before the Transportation Master Plan was adopted, staff have been advocating and moving complete street principles forward whenever possible. So whether it's an in-house city project or whether it's a development project, we've really been advocating to have that complete street cross-section. With the complete street standards that we're preparing this year, this is actually going to become our bylaw now. This is going to update our Manual of Engineering Standards and specifications, and is going to ensure that all of the criteria from complete streets are now mandated in all future road designs and constructions. The downtown mobility is another one that is, I think, really exciting because it's actually a compilation of several projects that have been conceived and talked about for years. They've been they're in the Transportation Master Plan, and they're all just coming together in one big opportunity, frankly. And so what we're doing is we've actually engaged a consultant to look at them and look at what we've got right now, kind of a 5,000 meter look down going, let's make sure that, first of all, that they all fit together, and second of all, that we're not overlooking any opportunities. Since the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan, things have changed. Some opportunities that were there aren't there, some that weren't there now are there. So we want to make sure that we can bring together a very holistic mobility project for the downtown, which we can roll out in a logical and cohesive manner. Some other ones that we're getting into this year, the Wakeside Avenue Corridor Plan, that one's been gone through a bit. We've had some engagements with the community already. Metro Drive is one that I'm very excited about. It sort of is part of my commuter route when I'm on my bike. And one of the real keys to that is, the vision for that is to be an all ages and all abilities connection from the ENN to Woodgrove. So providing that link now pretty much completes a all ages, all abilities connection from downtown to Woodgrove. So from that point, when that backbone's in place, we can then start strategically stepping off from that and linking in other neighborhoods and sub-neighborhoods to give people opportunities to walk or bike all the way from the north end to downtown. Stewart Avenue is another one that's pretty interesting. This is a project that we're collaborating with the ministry on. As most of you know, Stewart Avenue is about 6 lanes wide right now and spends most of its time in the summer helping out BC Ferries. So there's so many opportunities there to figure out ways to provide better amenities for cycling and pedestrians and landscaping and speed management too. Narrowing the cross sections, reducing the speeds, getting people to back down to where they should be for basically a neighborhood road. Terminal Ave from St. George to Brecken is going to be another very interesting project because that pretty much provides us with the transition from the highway to an urban road. Right now it still has a very highway feel to it, and we're looking at opportunities to bring that down, reduce speeds, increase the pedestrian and cycling amenities, and provide a lot more landscape features to soften the effects of it. Boxwood's also another strong connection. That's effectively our off-Bowen bikeway. So at full build-out, that's going to provide a connection from Country Club Mall all the way down to Buttertubs Marsh. And the street lighting level assessment is kind of what it sounds like, but when we went through our LED conversion last year, we were hearing a lot from people about how they were concerned about the level of light on the roads and really thought that we needed to do better. So we're going to undertake that and have a look and see how we're doing in comparison to our standards. The Active Route to School Toolkit. So as I mentioned, we've gone through and we've done some active route to school planning with the school district for 4 schools. Right now, we're kind of taking a step back and saying, what's the best way to continue forward with this? We're seeing a lot of benefit, and we want to continue to build on that, but we don't want these plans to become static. Back in 2006, 7, 8, I think there were 6 schools that had plans done for them. Going back to those schools today, most of them don't even know they exist. So we need to come up with a plan where we can work together and continue to keep these current so that new families coming into schools can get the information that the families who are moving through work through. Some projects that are going to be under construction this year: the Georgia Greenway, which is already probably half built, the Bastion Bridge seismic upgrade. So this is one that's going to be a little bit disruptive, but it's necessary to keep the bridge functioning for well into the future. Wellcock's One Port Drive access. That's getting the connection off of Front onto Port Drive. The Jinglepot and Westwood traffic signal. This is one that I've heard a great deal about. Every time somebody calls in, the question is, when are you going to signalize it? And pleased to say that imminently. It's going to be going out for construction probably in the next, the contract's going to be going out for tender in the next couple of weeks. We're also going to be starting phase 2 of this LED streetlight, completing the last section of the Harewood Bikeway, which will give us sidewalks and bike lanes from Comox to 8th, and also starting on the first part of the Boxwood Connector on-site works between Northfield and Rosstown. So looking forward, want to just emphasize that as we move forward, that we're not looking at streets being just for cars anymore. They're moving people, and they're also creating places. I grew up in Vancouver, and quite regularly people would say, do you want to go to the Drive? Do you want to go to Robson? Not because you want to drive up and down Commercial Drive, but because you actually want to go there and be there as part of the place. And so part of our complete streets and part of our planning, we want to create those places. So supporting mobility isn't just building infrastructure. So we need to give people tools to work with what we have right now. We need to give kids strategies on how to walk to and from school, take the bus, and give parents the comfort that their kids have the knowledge to do this. And then gathering information. like I said, there's lots of information out there to be had. We just need to get it and we need to use it so we can make sound decisions when we are making these investments into our infrastructure. So, with that, any questions?
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to staff. If you if we're looking at the Terminal Avenue, Brecken, St. George area, if you slow the traffic down on that area or mitigate it a certain way, would that not just put more pressure on Bowen for people who want to get downtown relatively quickly?
Through your worship. So if we were to pursue, say, an area-wide traffic calming plan for the Brecken area, people traveling through Brecken really shouldn't be commuting somewhere. It should just be people traveling within that neighborhood.
No, but I'm sorry, you said Terminal Avenue between Brecken and St. George.
Oh, sorry, we don't want to reduce the volume or capacity. We just want to slow the speeds down. So we want to bring it down to 50 kilometers. So, so would we see pressure move over to another corridor? Not likely, because we'd want to try and keep all of the corridors moving at lower speeds. So.
Okay. One way of looking at it might be to reduce the speed on Bowen and therefore put the traffic over on to the Terminal 19A. That way we have now an area that goes through the good part of town that we could now put bikes on because the traffic is significantly lower and less of. And then we use the Terminal Highway 19A as a street or a road, and then we make a street out of Bowen.
We could. I think that we would see greater success trying to diffuse the traffic over more corridors than we would by focusing it on one. I think that there's a risk that if we did pursue something like that, that it could end up looking more highway-centric than urban-centric. I think some of the strategies we want to do is really try and balance the loading on our roads so that we're not seeing this strong focus on one as opposed to over a few.
Okay. On Jinglepot and Westwood, will you be considering putting in bike lights so that bikes and pedestrians can cross at the same time and then all traffic stopped, or are we just going to have a regular street light there?
So we will be putting in pedestrian indicators. The bike-specific ones we will not be putting in because they will be redundant to the traffic lights and the pedestrian lights. So.
Okay. Yep, no, I think those are the only two questions. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Rose. I'm an avid cyclist, and I think something I've experienced and something I hear a lot from other cyclists is that it seems like the network in Nanaimo is a bit patchworky. So the question I have for you is how are projects identified and then prioritized in your work plan? Is it, I'm going to use this, the Westwood and Jinglepot intersection. I know a couple of cyclists who have been hurt there. Is it that we see, is it safety issues that shoot things to the top? Is it that we see more cycling traffic, so we know we want to kind of look at that area, which would be probably the case with Metro? Or is it we're laying sewers underneath and we're just going to make a complete street design? Like what is it that puts a project at the top of the list?
It could be any of those. So the traffic signal at Jinglepot Westwood has been on our radar for quite a while. Unfortunately, for vehicle reasons. So we are getting the incidental benefit of having some cycling facilities through there when we build it out. Mm-hmm. So really, I think what you're trying to sort of figure out is how much are we doing reactively versus proactively.
Yeah.
And so with that, we've got several projects that were identified as short-term goals through the Transportation Master Plan. We're slowly working our way through those. And then once we've got those, we kind of need to come up with a bit better implementation plan, and that's what's going to be extracted from the active transportation plan that we're going to do next year.
Okay, that's coming next year. Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would ask for the recommended motion. Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. I take it we have no correspondence, Ms. Gurry? No other business to transact that I'm aware of? We're on to question period on agenda items. Thank you very much. Janet Ismail, Labio Housing Site Location.
Hi, just a couple questions. Okay, so I take it from what I understand, the city leases the land for Labio housing to the government, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does the government pay the city for that leased land? They don't? The city doesn't? Does the city get a revenue from that?
Mr. Lindsay.
No, Your Worship, the city does not receive revenue.
Thank you. Is there a current budget in place to acquire land for permanent housing for the Labio to move it from its current site? Is that in the current budget to acquire land?
We have a budget for land and the acquisition of land, but we have no budget per se for a specific piece of land for a specific site. And we would not disclose that probably in the general sense in any event, because land acquisition is one of those things we try to keep in camera, lest the price of land be increased accordingly. And we wouldn't wish to place a greater burden than we do on the taxpayers of Nanaimo.
Point taken, thank you. But I guess my point is what I'm wondering is, okay, so it probably is in the current budget then, but not specific. And I'm looking at specific because it's in the 2 to 5 year plan for Labio. And I'm asking these questions.
You're working on an assumption that the city is going to pay for and provide land for housing.
That's what I'm wondering.
Sorry?
That's what my understanding was, is that the city's going to acquire the land for the permanent housing. Am I correct?
You can make no assumptions about such things. Sorry.
Oh. So that wouldn't come out of the city budget?
Whether or not any acquisition of land will come out of the city budget for any purpose will be determined by the city at the time that such acquisition is made. There is no requirement on the City of Nanaimo to purchase lands for any supportive housing sites or any housing sites whatsoever.
Okay. So, thank you. Okay. So what steps would need
I
to...
do hope you're coming to the conclusion of your questions.
I am. Thank you very
period
kindly.
of time here.
What steps would need to be taken to make the land acquisition or to move, because what I'm looking at is that the Labio housing site is 2 to 5 years, and I'm wondering what would move this forward to make this a priority to bump it down to 1 or 2. That's my point. So I'm trying to ask what steps. So that's what my form of questioning. I'm not trying to put out a bunch of information that really we don't need or want out there.
Councillor Armstrong.
If I can maybe say, I think everybody at this council, we're hearing what everybody's saying. And we're all actively working to try and find solutions. And what those solutions are, we don't know right now because we're in the information gathering process, all of that, and then decisions have to be made. And so for us to come out and tell you we have a different plan yet, right now we don't, because we're in the stage where, there's a bunch of councillors that weren't here to get all the previous information, so everybody's getting updated. We're working with staff's working with the partners to get information. So until we get all the information and facts, it's pretty hard to come forward with a plan. And as His Worship has said, housing really is the responsibility of the provincial government. So, and then we can work with those partners.
I guess
It's too bad, Ms. Ismail, you hadn't had an opportunity to spend 3 hours today when there was a substantive report given by senior staff and others respecting both sites. It was on the council agenda and was publicly available. It might assist you indeed. That session wasn't recorded. It was recorded and will be on the city website.
Oh, so you're suggesting I go watch that?
It might assist you a great deal in understanding the complications surrounding
Because I
this.
just didn't understand why the 2 to 5 years, because that seems so specific, and that's what I was trying to ascertain. So if I'm understanding correctly, if I go watch that, that should give me some valuable information?
It might assist you in understanding who has control, jurisdiction, and who does funding.
And the 2 to 5 years timeline for Labio? Would it be
Mr.
enough?
Lindsay.
Sorry, Your Worship, I missed that.
5 years to...
The 2 to 5 years, I was just saying to Mr. Rudolph, I think the 2 to 5 years came primarily from my statements when we were doing the community engagement sessions. And really, it was around practically, even if you had property identified tomorrow, there's still a process depending on that property, if it has to go through development approvals, if it then needs building permits, and then you have the ultimate time to construct a building, which could, be anywhere from, if a simple building, maybe 6 months, but more likely up to a year and a half just for construction. So there's a minimum, and that's why I said a minimum amount of process of 2 years.
Councillor Armstrong.
If I can just add one more thing, Your Worship. I think it's important to know that this council has been proactive in addressing some of the issues with the appointment of 15 more police officers, which are coming, which can help address that. The bylaw positions, which we've increased as well, and also with the increase of firemen. So we are looking to increase some of the services to help with some of those issues, and it's going to take time. I don't believe there's an overnight solution to this crisis because it's been years in the making, but I honestly believe that everybody at this table is committed to trying to find a solution and work with the community and the service providers as well as the homeless to try and address the issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wagar.
Thank you.
Item 7F, I believe.
Yes. It's my understanding that BC Housing intends to develop these temporary sites into more permanent sites, and that the city's potential role in this is to assist them in identifying locations for these sites. So my question is, what kind of progress is being made? Are you guys engaged with BC Housing in identifying potential sites? I'm not asking where they are or what they cost. I'm asking, are you looking for these places? And is there any sort of long-range planning in progress that will turn these temporary sites into, permanent supportive housing sites, and also potentially even another temporary site or two? Because as I'm sure you all know, there's still 100 or more people living in the bushes around us.
The estimate is even higher than that, Mr. Wagar. I think I can safely say on behalf of council, we are not ignorant, and I don't use that in the pejorative sense, we are not ignorant of the demands and needs of housing the several hundred homeless people in the city, or the several hundred more who are at risk of being homeless. And the city is undertaking through staff, I think, the kind of work that is important to address those issues within the jurisdiction that we enjoy over this. I don't think you're going to get a better answer than that tonight, nor with great respect. Were you expecting a better answer than that, other than to demonstrate our awareness of the issue?
So you can't tell me whether or not you're actively looking for properties that might be used for this?
I do not wish to place the city in any jeopardy with respect to either acquisitions undertaken by the city or that might be undertaken by another level of government, all of which are funded by taxpayers, Mr. Wagar. I think you can read the newspaper yourself. You've seen the substantive amounts of money that the provincial government has put into housing projects. We're the subject of a wonderful presentation by Mr. Lindsay last week respecting public housing and other housing units, seniors units in the community. So I think it's safe to say the problem is not being ignored, and each level of government is undertaking those things which are appropriate to their level of responsibility.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Brown. Well done. Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Thank you.
Your Worship, Your Worship, Your Worship. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
You're just going to be recessing the open to proceed back in
Yes, recess in the
camera.
open only. Yes. Motion to recess the open. Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor. Motion carried. Thank you very much.